Mixing matcha powder with green tea is a great way to get more flavor out of a tea, but how does the taste develop over time? In this video, we're going to be trying out a mix of matcha powder and sencha leaves to see what the flavor is like and how the tea performs over multiple infusions. Let's dive right into the world of matcha iri sencha. Okay, so what we have here is the Shizuku Sencha. Now this is a unique tea, I guess you would call it a matcha iri. So it's a mixture of matcha powder and sencha leaves. And this is a tea that I was first introduced to by Mr. Nuruki in Shiran. So Shiran is a really small town in southern Japan. You see it's product of Shiran, Japan here. And this tea was designed to be their ultimate green tea for cold brewing. So it's designed as a cold brew tea. You know, one of the criticisms about cold brew tea is it kind of lacks the raw strength of a hot brew tea. And one of the ways that they compensate for that is by mixing this matcha powder in. So the matcha powder is going to release into the first infusion of the cold brew, and it's going to create this kind of cloudy green color and this really strong, almost fruity infusion. But I've also found that it works exceptionally well as a hot brew tea. So today we're going to hot brew the Shizuku Sencha. This is normally something I don't do. Normally I kind of save this for the summertime and use it as my go-to cold brew tea. But today we're going to be attempting it because it's much colder out now. We're going to be attempting it as a hot brew tea. See the matcha powder coming off. And I'm just going to go ahead and brew this like a normal sencha. I'm going to be using 60 degrees Celsius. I tend to go a little bit lower with the water temp. You can go higher as you like. 7 degrees Celsius also works pretty well. And we're going to let this brew for 1 minute. And what I want to check specifically when I brew this tea is how it transitions from the first infusion to the second infusion, because you would think that the matcha powder is going to be released into that first infusion, and then there's going to be a drop off in flavor in the second infusion. But I really want to test this out and see if the second infusion, has a lot of flavor to it, or if there's a huge drop off from the first to the second. So if we take a look at the leaves here, there's some smaller leaf particles that are floating to the top of the teapot, and the matcha powder is really just kind of mixing in to the infusion. So I think that's going to give the tea a lot of strength. So let's go ahead and pour this out. See, beautiful green color, almost luminescent, almost like a glow stick or something. And that's mostly from the matcha powder that's mixing into the water. So if you see that right there, really powerful green color, almost glowing. It's almost like, it's almost got like a light source to it. So try this out. Flavor is actually really sweet, because normally you wouldn't think it would be sweet because the powdered tea is really giving a lot of strength. So when you powder the tea leaves, you're really concentrating the flavor. You're drinking more of the leaf rather than just kind of the outer layer. So I would have expected this tea to be a little bit more bitter, but it's actually quite sweet. It's got a little bit of this fruitiness to it. If I had to compare it with one tea, I think it would be the Shizuku Sencha. So this is a tea from Mr. Kawaji, a deep steam tea. Deep steam teas are kind of in the same category because you're also getting a lot of the leaf material into the infusion. A little bit of this sweet corn note, a little bit of this edamame. What's nice is that normally there's this balance between a tea that's super flavorful but also a little bit bitter, and a tea that's, not so bitter but doesn't have a whole lot of flavor. This is definitely a really good balance between strength and smoothness, I guess you could say. You can kind of feel it tingling on the sides of the tongue, but it also has a smooth finish that's really nice. Okay, so now we're going to go for the second infusion. And if we take a look at the leaves here, you would expect that a majority of the matcha powder has already made its way into the cup. So I think there's going to be a huge difference in flavor between the first and the second brewing, because now we're just brewing the sencha leaves. Pour in roughly the same temperature water, same amount of water, but we're going to be using a brewing time of 20 seconds. So the first infusion really is just kind of opening up the tea leaves, And once the tea leaves are opened up, they only need 20 seconds to release their flavor. So that's why the second and third infusion of a tea is going to be a lot shorter. Still got that green color, which I'm surprised about, because you would think that the color wouldn't be quite as green because all the matcha went into the first infusion. But I think what's happening is kind of the same thing that happens with deep steam teas, whereas the leaves are kind of starting to break down a little bit. The cell walls of the leaves are breaking down and they're kind of releasing more leaf material into the brewing. So here you still have that luminescent quality in the color. And it's actually seeming like it's even more cloudy, more opaque. It's definitely not as sweet as the first brewing, but that's something that you would expect from any other tea. Normally the first brewing is the sweetest and the second brewing is kind of, the most powerful in these steamed vegetable notes. Definitely getting a lot of that here. A little bit more of the acidity, a little bit more of the minerality. Almost getting a little bit of more of an umami in the finish. So more of this savory flavor that you would get with a gyokuro. A little bit of bitterness for sure, a little bit of astringency. Definitely would make for kind of a good palate cleanser. It's kind of got this, it leaves the palate feeling very kind of cleansed, I would say. So second brewing, definitely very flavorful, even though I presume most of the matcha powder was left in the first infusion. The second infusion still has plenty of flavor. So that kind of, goes to test one of my assumptions going into this tea, which was that the flavor would have a steep drop off from the first to the second. So like any other tea that we've tried so far, this is definitely an example of a tea that you should brew more than one time. Even if you cold brew the tea, you can definitely reinfuse the leaves with hot water, and you'll get a completely different tasting tea. So again, don't throw your tea leaves out after one brewing. You can definitely reuse them, and not only will you get more tea, but you'll also get different tasting teas. So it's a good way to get to know different angles and different aspects of a tea when you try the multiple infusions. It's also a good way to save money and make your tea last longer at home. So definitely something that you should be looking into. But anyways, thank you all so much for tuning into this video. I hope you found it helpful. If you want to pick up the Shizuku Sencha, whether to prepare it as a hot brew tea or a cold brew tea, you can find it on our website, neoteas.com. We also have some other great Sencha teas that you'd enjoy. I mentioned the Asatsuyu Sencha before, which has a similar flavor. This is a really good tea to pick up. And if you want to try a bunch of different teas and see which one your favorite is, you can also try one of our samplers. So this is a good way to kind of learn more about the world of Japanese green tea while also kind of figuring out which ones that you like the most. Thank you all so much for watching. If you have any questions about this tea or about green tea in general, please feel free to leave those in the comments below. And otherwise, we'll see you next time.